Many people say there are mainly 6 themes that largely define the elections that Nigeria held this weekend. Those themes are identity and security, institutional preparedness, intra and inter-party disputes, voter participation, and even the question of personalities versus parties. But while identity politics is sometimes more visible at the national level, state politics is arguably its main domain, with candidate selection requiring careful consideration of one or a combination of ethnicity, religion, even senatorial district zone sometimes. When we look at the February 25th elections, we see the important role of personalities over political agenda, as presidential backing for a candidate in a state does not always translate down the ballot. And fractious party primaries leading to intra-party disputes, and the fact that 60% of contests did not have a sitting governor on the ticket also fueled strong inter-party competition in a number of states. At the end of the day, 28 states, 1,021 constituencies, and 993 state assembly seats. That was what was on the call for Saturday. Dr. Omoshola Deji, political scientist, joins me now as we look at the elections that were. I think at this point, many Nigerians are ready for all the pronouncements and the winners, and let's just be moving on. But there has to be room for introspection. So, Dr. Deji, let's start with that. INEC, we were all expecting better because there was criticism, there were complaints, and INEC said they would do better. Do you think that the electoral umpire did better on Saturday?
Well, I think the electoral umpire did better, but not up to expectation, from my view, because as at past 10 p.m. on Saturday in Lagos, for example, I think 50.5% of the result have been uploaded to the IRF portal, which is a significant improvement on what we had during the presidential election. But that is unsatisfactory because if we look at it, the IRF is supposed to serve us the result of every polling unit real time in order to curb malpractice, political corruption, whereby people have to invade the collation center. So the IRF is to give us the primary data so that we already have all the results. So if you go to the ward, to the state collation center to do any kind of manipulation, it amounts to nothing. So at past 10 p.m., where most of the polling units have closed for the day and the result would have already been announced at those polling units, I think by past 10 p.m. we should have been able to successfully predict the winner based on what has been uploaded to the IRF portal, especially in a cosmopolitan state like Lagos. If it were to be some remote setting or rural area, we can say maybe there are network issues, but in Lagos, virtually everywhere you stay, there's this network availability. So that is not an excuse. So the over 40% that was not being uploaded, what were the reason? Because as at 10 p.m., it is no longer real time. Real time is immediately after the elections were conducted and results were announced at the polling unit. The next thing for the presiding officer of that polling unit is to upload the result. That is what it means by real time. But if there is any delay and things begin to drag, you give room for manipulation, you give room for people to doubt the process, and that is no longer real time. So I believe that INEC could have done better in terms of uploading the result like real time and we having all the result. For example, in the case of the Osun election, we would see that the result were uploaded real time. Ekiti election, the result were uploaded real time, and even before INEC made pronouncement, citizens had already predicted based on their calculation of the result that were uploaded. That is the beauty of that is the beauty of democracy, whereby we need transparency because the transparency, the accountability, the credibility is one thing that is missing, and that is what this IRF seeks to address. So if there's any delay of any kind, then IRF has not achieved its main objective that we wanted to achieve.
Okay, so let's look at some of the states. I know we spoke about this on Saturday, but it was a very interesting race because there were lots of incumbents not being able to come back because they were term limited. So 11 incumbent governors in Lagos, Adamawa, Borno, Ogun, Kwara, Oyo, Nasarawa, Bauchi, Yobe, Zamfara, and Gombe states were able to seek re-election, and then voters in 17 states were getting entirely new candidates. But we also had the situation where these new candidates who are to become new governors, some of them were the anointed of the governors that were heading out of office. What role do you think the power of incumbency played, as well as those who attempted to anoint a successor in this election? Because we've seen tensions since the presidential, even before the presidential, but there were tensions. But the incumbents, some of them won, We also saw those who wanted to anoint be successful in their anointing.
Well, in terms of being successful in anointing a successor, some incumbent governors were lucky, some were not. In the case of Benue, for example, the Benue State governor had a double loss. He lost his senatorial election,
yes,
and he also lost the governorship election of his anointed candidate. What the Benue State election has taught us is that election goes beyond speaking about security. It's like an hierarchy of need for the people. There must be a means of survival. When you are able to survive, then maybe you begin to think about security and other welfare issues, because the governor of Benue State won his second term based on security issue, based on the herdsmen crisis that, oh, we won't let them invade our land, we won't let them take over our land. And the Benue people bought into that at that point in time. And the same governor is owing people their salaries. So the people are impoverished, the people are in pain. So the constant rhetoric of, oh, security did no longer sell this time. And the ruling party at the central was wise enough to have brought forward an acceptable candidate that the people could resonate with, which I think is a reverend father or something, you know. Yes. So they were able to bring somebody that the people could believe in, and the people now believe that, okay, let us begin to perhaps think about our welfare, what we're going to eat, how our children is going to go to school, how we are going to survive. So I think the Benue State governor made a mistake by hampering on the issue of security. And I think that affected him, and he paid the price. He was so unlucky, unlike because he belongs to the G5, unlike Seyi Makinde, who for the presidential election allegedly supported the candidate of the opposition party, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But in the state itself, he was able to win by a wide margin. The reason why he's so lucky, it must be investigated and further research. But for my assertion, I think that he escaped by a good stroke of luck. Maybe the APC in the state were able to perhaps work against their own candidate based on one or two grievances in that state. If you look at the Southwest in total, Oyo State is the only state being ruled by the PDP that is going through on-cycle election. Now, off-cycle, Osun State is being ruled by PDP, but the election is off-cycle. So for you to have won an election in a state, in a region whereby the president-elect had come from, naturally there's always this bandwagon effect that, oh, it is our son that's going to be the president, let us align with the central. But now, the people still insisted on voting for Seyi Makinde, despite the fact that they voted Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu for the presidency. So I think Seyi Makinde took a great risk, and at the end of the day, he was able to survive it.
So I like the fact you've taken us to your states, because there's been some conversation in recent times, but not just recent times, immediately after the election, as to how the situation with the two incumbents in Southwest, particularly these two, that's the APC's Babajide Sanwo-Olu in Lagos and the PDP Seyi Makinde in Oyo, which both won their re-election bids. But many people have tried to draw parallels between how the elections in each of these states actually played out. Do you think that there are parallels to this, or this is more of a divergent situation? Things were very largely peaceful in Oyo State. Not necessarily the same thing could be said of how the elections happened in Lagos.
Well, they are both governors, but I think the governor of Lagos State has a lot to learn from his counterpart in Oyo State. How to play politics without going to the extreme. How to play politics without unlocking some doors that are not supposed to be unlocked, because the consequence is going to live with us for a very long time. The governor of Lagos State, when Labour Party won the state, went into panic mode. Now, some of his approaches were right in terms of you see him going to club, going to different churches, taking selfie, you know, those are good approaches to relate with the people. But then his aides went overboard by bringing ethnic politics into the game. And I am surprised that the governor could not take action on that, because he just suffered from a crisis during the EndSARS protest, which almost turned the state into a very, a state of anarchy itself. But having survived the NSAS protest, I thought that the governor would have done everything possible to avert anything that can lead us to Rwanda. But he, in that regard, I think he was too much in a panic mode. He was too, desperate to win at all costs, and that itself override his good sense of decision making. Another aspect is the use of thugs. We would see that thugs had a field day. The state was virtually left in the hands of thugs, and that is not something that we must allow, because all these Boko Haram banditry have their political side. Now that we have emboldened the thugs are now like a political stakeholder in the state. And if you begin to have non-state actors, people that have the potential for crime, people that have the potential to do bad to the people,
yes,
become emboldened, that is sends a wrong signal to the people, and that is dangerous for the state itself. How on earth will, in a state that there is law and order, that thugs will bring out megaphone and start shouting that if you don't vote for a political party, don't come out? How on earth, in this 21st century, will monarchs be making controversial statements, controversial decisions? How on earth will people be categorized based on their ethnic group? And that is the essence of political education. Because if you look at the candidate of the Labour Party, who they all were all striving to defeat, the ethnic narrative is false. And I think some of our Yoruba people try to buy into it because they lack the political education. And that is one of the effects of erasing history from our curriculum. Because if you are studying history, if you hear the name Rhodes Vival, you won't think it's an Igbo name. What your mind will go to is the slave era, whereby when the British came into Africa, specifically Nigeria in this case, to pick some of our forefathers as slaves. During then, some of our forefathers were so loyal to their colonial master that they adopt their name. Rhodes Vival, it's not an Igbo name. It is a name that his ancestors inherited from their colonial masters. Okay. That is the essence of political education that we need to work on. And now that the governor has won his election, the consequence is going to live with us for a long time. Because, for example, this morning, I saw a marriage heading for collapse just because the wife is Igbo and the husband is Yoruba, and the inter-ethnic strife is already affecting the marriage. Now, people will live with this for long, because you won't go back to the people to correct the narrative that, oh, please, they are all false, I just did it for electoral purpose. You have won the election and you are happy and you just move forward. But the consequence lives with us for a long time, and that is one thing that we shouldn't encourage if we want a just and equitable society.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because there's a lot of conversation about that on social media, and it's one that I asked my previous guest, Dr. Oluwatola, about if we have crossed the line, and he said we flirted with this ethnic bigotry, racial and religious tensions for a very long time, but we still have an opportunity to pull back. But I need to ask you this. Just today, in its second preliminary statement, the European Union Election Observer Mission, Nigeria, noted that there was obstruction and organized violence which limited the free expression of the will of the people, despite efforts by civil society to promote democratic standards. Now, the chairman of the Labour Party in Lagos State has called for INEC to cancel the elections in the state due to electoral malpractices and irregularities. The candidate of the party in the state, Gbadebo Rhodes Vival, has also rejected the results. And the PDP's Ladi Adebuti also rejected the results in the Ogun race as well. So let's say that there is a case to be made for cancelling the elections in Lagos or elsewhere. What would we need to see? What would need to be proven for there to be a slim hope of a cancellation?
Substantial compliance or substantial non-compliance. That's what needs to be proven in the court of law. If you can prove that the election failed in the aspect of substantial, underline substantial compliance. Compliance in this case is in terms of the law on which upon which the election was conducted, which is first the Nigerian Constitution, the Electoral Act 2022, and the INEC guideline. So the court is going to look at it in terms of substantial compliance or non-compliance. And another thing that may be looked at in terms of compliance is the role of the security agencies in terms of violence. And I think that, for example, in Lagos, there's so much violence. But the problem is that our judiciary falls short when it comes to confidence, in the sense that we've seen elections whereby there is massive violence. I give you two examples. During the Osun election, the first one between Adeleke and Oyetola, you remember the white handkerchief kind of like
yes.
code, and people were beating blue, black, and at the end of the day, the election tribunal and the Supreme Court, ratified the election in favor of Oyetola, and you begin to wonder that, okay, how do we? Is there any deterrent, even if you feel that, okay, Oyetola in your wisdom won the election? Is there any deterrent for those that have committed those acts so that they will desist from such acts? We've not seen much of that. During the Kogi election that ushered Yaya Bello in, we allegedly saw a helicopter of the Nigerian police flying in the air, and they were gunshot, allegedly at peaceful voters.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that should come into play when we are looking at substantial compliance or non-compliance in sense of the electorate itself. How were the electorate able to participate freely, fairly in the process? What is the credibility of the process? So even if the cases go to the court, like we are just going to see again, and most of these elections are going to end at the court. But if they end at the court, I want to see a situation whereby our Supreme Court justices will rule based on the substance of the case, not on technicality. If there's any technicality attached to any case, just speak to the councils, make sure those technicalities are corrected, and rule based on substance of the case, so that you are taking the electorate into cognizance in your ruling, not that you will just by executive fiat just cancel or overrule the decision of the people just because of technicality. Okay. So that is not democracy at all, in the true sense of the word. If we are to subject all our decisions now based on technicality, anybody can make a mistake, and if you want to go the other way, just base it on technicality. I think I said it the last.
You said it on Saturday, but there's so many conversations. This is just the day after many of the results have come out, and we expect more results to come out even tonight and possibly tomorrow as well. So conversations on Nigeria's governorship and state houses of assembly elections will continue. Let me say a very big thank you to Dr. Omoshola Deji, political scientist, for joining me. You'll be seeing him and many other analysts on News Central as we continue to break down the issues and we highlight certain things that have arisen from the elections. But when we come back after this, I have my final words.